What up? We are back. That's right. It is episode 204.
Nope, it's 205 because we did
Live.
204. Yeah, because it's not listed on the Spreaker. We didn't do the Spreaker last time.
Oh, that's right. You were at my domicile too, so
Hmm.
we were doing it real big then. Yeah, we are doing it big. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 205, the human consciousness. We're going to be looking at the human consciousness and some very interesting theories regarding it. Going to pepper in some other stuff. Hello, Facebook user. Who is that? Do you know who that is?
Nope, doesn't say.
I can check on my end. I'll check on my end. Yeah, no worries. Because that happens. And it's not your fault, by the way. It's a Streamlabs or whatever it is thing.
Yeah, the new technology we have, it unless you go through and like sign up for us, then it'll not show us your name. But we can figure you out. We can go to Facebook and
Oh,
figure
Sherry Break. Hey,
She's starting
Sherry
her
Break.
own. She's starting her own
I saw
podcast.
that.
Actually,
we're gonna promote that as soon as you drop it. We're gonna put the link for people to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about that too. That's very freaking awesome of you to start that. Looking forward to it. Hopefully everything's good on your end. Raven Rock is looking beautiful, looking freaking amazing. By the way, that's very freaking cool. So yeah, tonight, human consciousness and the things that we perceive around our human consciousness. So we're going to be getting into things like demonic possession, spirits, alternate realities, all that beautiful, amazing things that we have for you. But
all that beautiful brain footage.
But it's bean footage, but brain footage. Get it? It's a little joke. See what you did there. Don't give away the secret recipe. It's that time, the time that my co-host Tate, and we don't have any jingles for this thing yet.
So no, I think I can add it in here. I think I can do that, but I haven't played around with that yet. I've been working on trying to get us a good video intro and for the theme song and everything. So that'll be the next on the list, adding the joke song.
Oh, we're gonna have a joke song. That's right.
A joke song.
Joke song. What does a sprinter eat before a race? Nothing. They fast. There it is.
That would be a Facebook fact checker. That would be like, well, actually, sprinters have to eat complex carbohydrates and blah, 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 blah.
We are neither Facebook nor fact checkers of Facebook, so we don't have to worry about that nonsensical nonsense. So we're good to go. When we say human consciousness, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Rational thought and being able to know yourself, really. I mean, because that's the difference. That's supposedly the difference between us and an animal. An animal isn't particularly, as they say, self-aware. Although some of us who have cats will beg to differ. But
that's a whole other issue that we don't have time to get into. That takes like 4 shows just to talk about the feline mind, if you will.
Scientifically, that means that that's what sets us apart, that we can imagine and do things. Although certain animals are very, very close.
Well, dolphins, for one. Supposedly are highly intelligent animals. Yes.
Octopi.
Nice usage of the plural form of that, too, by the way.
That's right, because it's not just one. I mean, unless there's just one octopus that's like smarter than
anybody else. It's a hive mind.
Just one.
Just one. That's it. It's reproduced asexually. So, but yeah, to me, when I think of consciousness, I think of, I think therefore I am. So because I have rational thoughts in my head, I am a person. Now, for those of you that don't know about what's known as the Chinese room, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's basically a place that says that a computer cannot, no matter how much it tries, if it's fed Chinese language, no matter how hard it tries, it cannot think independently. So it will spit out the Chinese language that it perceives, but it can't think for itself. So if you ask it complex questions, it can't deviate from the program that has been installed on it, and it can't think independently of itself, which got me to thinking, what if that's what we're living in, just one big Chinese room? I mean, we talk about the Matrix. We talk about which is a very cliched term, by the way, but the basic simulation that we supposedly live in. And you have to wonder if that simulation that we are now currently living in is just one big Chinese room. We can't deviate. We're fed information, we spit out information, but we can't deviate from that. And now I know you're thinking, but we can think for ourselves. If we're programs, not really. We're thinking inside of the program that we are placed in. We're not thinking outside of that program. And you have to wonder if our program masters are higher up on the Kardashev scale. I know we had a show I'm gonna say like a year or two, year and a half ago, about the Kardashev scale and its different numbers. And the highest one was an omnipotent being or an omnipotent society that basically can jump dimensions. It was like something 11 at that point, but it was really high. So if our consciousness is nothing but a product of a computer program, where does that leave us? Now obviously I don't believe that we are just a computer program. I believe that our consciousness is very interesting. So what I place before all of you today, when you deal with consciousness, you deal with the thinking of consciousness. So you people always say, I'm going to get to a higher conscious. I want to raise my vibration, if you will. And that takes mental wherewithal. It's waking up in a different attitude, waking up feeling different. And so I gave it some thought, and I don't know how many of you out there have heard of tulpas. Tulpas are basically, some people say that they're created and they're real. They're figment. They're like your imaginary friend that you've made, and you've put so much effort into it that you've made it real all of a sudden. And it's a walking, talking being. A similar event was in the movie The Dark Half, where a guy wrote a book about, I forget his name. It's an old Stephen King movie, an old Stephen King book. I've read and seen the movie. Read the book and seen the movie. And that was basically a form of a tulpa. He created it from a book, from his own mind. Boom, there it is. So what I'm asking, does our consciousness create our reality, or does our reality create our consciousness?
Now, it's an interesting question, and it reminds me of something that I was going to bring up anyway, and it ties it in. It's the analogy of the cave, which I believe is Plato, right?
Yes.
Plato?
Yep.
Not Play-Doh, like you're a kid playing with Play-Doh.
No, not
Plato.
Spaghetti.
Plato.
Plato.
And the analogy of the cave basically is that what we perceive with our senses is limited to such an extent that we're like a person that's been raised in a cave their entire life. And the only thing that they've ever experienced is flickering shadows on the wall from a torch or from a candle or from something. So their entire universe has been shadows on the wall of this cave, whereas everything else that exists is outside of the cave.
Yes.
But they can't go out and see it. They're either imprisoned in the cave, or for some reason they don't want to leave the cave, or something like that. And it's a good metaphor for consciousness, because a lot of people, especially within the last 5 years or so, willingly kind of close themselves off from certain parts of the outside world. They're like, nope, I don't want to see that. I don't want to know that. This is how I want my life to be comfortable. This is how it is. And so you have to wonder just how conscious these people really are. Is consciousness a choice at that point? Or is it something that's going to happen to you regardless? Do we direct it or control it at all? And that also gets back a little bit to the simulation theory, where maybe we don't direct it at all. But some people are even more into that than others.
Which also leads into the self-fulfilling prophecy ideology that you look at when you think that
Yep.
your conscious controls you, instead of you controlling your consciousness. And also you have to wonder too, and I've thought this before, it's kind of like, I'm trying to frame this in the right way. I'm trying to give a good example here. But it's like, if you go to a haunted location, right? And you know nothing about it. You're not even from this country. Let's say you're from the deepest parts of South America or Africa or the Russian tundra or one of the many other places that basically have nomads. They don't really do the online thing. They don't really do the whole ghost hunting thing, right? Take them to the location. Don't tell them anything, a single solitary thing. Are they going to see the same things that you see, or is what you see a product of what other people have said they've seen? So it's already been planted in your head. Now you're seeing these things based off the power of your consciousness, based off of your mind power. And before people are like, well, that sounds a little ridiculous, remember that there have been Buddhist monks, there have been Brahmin priests. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the spike bed where they lay on the spikes. Mind over matter material. So who's to say that your consciousness isn't strong enough to do that? We think of the gentleman that set himself on fire during a protest, didn't scream, didn't do nothing, just sat there and literally burned alive because he had power of mind. So you have to wonder if, in case, that is what happens when people go to haunted locations. Another point to this, I think that a good 85% of demonic possession is a brain chemical. It's a brain chemical issue. Annalise Michael is a prime example of that, in the regard that they gave her drugs like to sort of right her brain, because her brain, she was basically a paranoid schizophrenic. And once they righted it, she started exhibiting signs of being normal, right? The minute they took her off the medication, her mind state went haywire because it was now normal, and they took her off basically cold turkey. They didn't wean her off of it. She stopped taking it, and her mental state deteriorated rapidly. Was the demonic possession a conscious thing? Was it all in her mind? Because what I've noticed about demonic possessions, and a lot of people say, well, they're speaking other tongues, right? She was in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is a Latin church, right? And they would have told her about all sorts of different things and ideologies and concepts. So who's to say that her DNA didn't have a link to some past ancestor, and then they're pulling that out in demonic possession? And if demonic possession is, in fact, more of a mental brain chemical mishap. I'm not saying all of them are, mind you. I'm not saying, like I said, that's why I said like 85%. So you got a 15% variant, you got a 15% chance that they are. So you have this slight chance, because I do believe that it could happen. But do I think that, every time there's a possession that's demonic? No, I think the person just, because you got to remember, for a long time, we didn't have proper mental health identification. It was all just demonic possession, or you're just crazy, and now we sort of can conduct those, I wouldn't say experiments, but tests to see if a person has, brain chemical issues, bipolar, paranoid, schizophrenic, things of that nature. So I have to wonder if demonic possession, because I don't really, here in the States, right? And I'm not saying I'm just talking to everybody and saying, no, you're demonic possessed. Are these demonic possessions part of our consciousness, where we project, right? Project our fears into a being like a tulpa, and we're possessed by this being. When we talk to beings, when you have people that actually say, I talked to so-and-so from whatever, Zeta Star 7, is that just part of their brain splitting off into almost a split personality, but in a tulpa-esque way, because they put themselves under such a trance when dealing with this being? Now, I know some of you will probably say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Demonic possession happens, yada, yada, yada. I'm not denying that it doesn't. What I'm saying is, can we solve a lot of these possessions or discussions with so-called interdimensional beings just straight by saying, okay, the person's mind state is a little different? Not saying off, but different. So they're projecting this out and seeing this.
I think that's a valid point, because for the longest time, as far back as we can imagine, anybody who was exhibiting signs of just mental deviance, or just being slightly different in mind, not even necessarily being bad, just being different, as far back as the Middle Ages or earlier, the first thought was, oh, you're being influenced. You're being influenced by a spirit, or you're being influenced by this. And eventually that morphed into demonic possession or demonic something or other as the fallback. And so a lot of people didn't get treatment. They got castigated, they got punished, they got tortured, they got all these different things happening, because the thought was, hey, we have to drive the demon out. And the demon doesn't want to be in a body that's in a lot of pain or discomfort. So unfortunately, they caused the person pain and discomfort to get the demon out. Yeah. But at that point, even if that somehow that works on the disorder, you're now creating a new disorder by causing so much pain and suffering in a person. And even though our understanding of that thing has evolved over several hundred years, the methods did not evolve as quick as the theories for the longest time. Like even as far as late as the 70s, we still had people who were mistreated pretty badly for being crazy. They weren't treated like they had demons and spirits so much, but because you were crazy, okay, we have to do things. We have to do electroshock therapy. We have to do this. We have to do that. And there's still some instances of that today, although it's a lot more controlled. There's a lot more consequences if it comes out that you've been mistreating somebody. But as a consequence, we've gone almost the opposite direction in modern times, where instead of over-treating, now we're under-treating. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of problems walking around who aren't getting their problems addressed. And that's why we have so much stuff going around. We've had a lot of shootings lately over the last few years. We've had that stabbing in Canada that was crazy. We had a lot of stuff that's basically mental stuff. Like it's somebody snapped somehow and nobody caught it because we're not on the lookout for it as much. We all want to talk about our feelings and everything like that now, but we forget that some people don't do that. Some people don't talk real openly. No, they do not. Even when they do, we don't always listen well enough. So it's a real difficult thing. And it's as far as demonic possession goes anymore, while there may still be legitimate times that it happens now, I think it would slip through the cracks. I don't think most people who are even trained to recognize it would recognize it. Right. Because they're going to be like, well, there's a good possibility this is a mental disorder, which is probably true in many issues. But in the few cases where it might be a possession, and I'm not saying one way or the other whether that's a true thing or not, it's if it is, it's more likely to be missed now, which is also very unfortunate.
It's really there's really just went in one direction completely instead of going the middle ground and being like, okay, we need to evaluate this. What are their brain patterns? What are their brain wave patterns, I should say? What are their feelings, emotions, actions, reactions? But instead, we're so quick to say it's got to be a mental disorder. And it could be something of the paranormal variety. It could be something of an otherworldly being, you know, because we can't really rule it out 100%. We can say, well, no, they're not possessed. To me, demonic possession seems more in line of, greed and hate, and because it serves more of a purpose. If you're demonically possessed and you're just throwing up all over your house and you're climbing on the walls, sure, you're going to freak people out, but it doesn't seem like that would be something a demon would want as a success story when he has to travel back to Hades and tell the devil, hey, I possess this person. Oh, yeah, well, what did you do? I made vomit everywhere. Because
that reminds me.
Oh, go ahead.
There's actually a good illustration of that for anybody who's into Neil Gaiman's work. And this was from a book that he wrote with Terry Pratchett quite a while ago. They had a series of it, I think, on Amazon. It's called Good Omens. And there's a demon who has modernized. He's a modern demon. He does modern things, and he blends in and things like that. And every few years, he gets summoned back to explain, what have you done to corrupt mankind lately? And he'll meet up with other demons and be like, oh yeah, I tempted a priest. He'll belong to us within a year. Oh, I tempted a cheating wife. She'll be ours within 6 months. And what he did is he designed a highway in England that snarls constantly with traffic. And it makes people, millions of people, grouchy all the time. So it's millions of little bits of negative energy passed out into the universe constantly at a constant rate. And then the other demons can't understand it. They're like, why would you do that? And he's like, don't you understand? This is how you do it. Like, look at all the grand whatever. And it's kind of interesting because people assume that, yeah, it's demonic possession is going to be somebody monstrous. They're going to be speaking in tongues. They're going to be doing all things stuff. Right. But who's to say an entity like that isn't going to modernize and use the tools that are available?
Yes. Exactly. The CEO that's like, I want to pinch more money out of people, so I'm going to cut their wages. I'm going to buy from this place, which is cheaper, cut wages. I'm going to make more money. So it's more greed. So it's like now you have that effect. And then what you're doing too is you're creating people to hate you. So you have that negative energy too. And then their hate. And then it spins and it spins and it gets bigger like a foil ball. You keep adding until this foil ball is gigantic. And I just can't see the whole throwing up and speaking ancient tongues as being a viable way for wickedness to go out in the world. Now, maybe like you'll scare a couple people, but in terms of scaring, people say that's fake. You can't. We live in a day and age where you can't really pass anything off without somebody saying that's fake. It's fake. They photoshopped it, or they used Movie Maker to edit bits and pieces, and they stopped and did this and did that.
The moon landing, the round Earth, the space station, all that stuff. It's all fake.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't you? Loving the show. We'll catch more later. Well, thank you very much. I think I want to say I think that was. I want to make sure that was who that was. We have to check because Facebook user is different than it was Sherry Break. Thank you, Sherry Break. Sherry's got a tour coming to Canal Fulton, Ohio. You guys should check that out if you can. Unfortunately, I will not be in town as I will be speaking at an engagement, or I would have gone, taken my co-host, we'd have signed up. It's been a perfect night. However, things happen. But definitely go check her out. She's got a bunch of amazing books too. Sherry Break, you can find her books on Amazon. Wrote a bunch of amazing books about Huntington Stark County, the Mansfield Penitentiary, just all that good stuff. So if you get time, go check her out. And if you don't got time, go check her out. Just go check her out, period. But the notion to me that demons are just out for green vomit and crawling up walls just seems kind of, because my whole thing, and especially today, right? You would have mad footage of this. You would have people falling over themselves with YouTube video after YouTube video. You really don't see that much. Yeah, you get the scary, voices and things like that. Okay, I get that. You can pull that off. But what I find to be interesting too is the notion of jinn. And we've talked about jinn before. Are jinn also part of the human consciousness? Because is religion itself a product of the human consciousness, or is the human consciousness a product of religion and the belief of one day passing on and or dying, and then dealing with that? We have so many different beliefs in our world today. We have Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Taoism. I go on and on. I could Zoroastrianism. I could just keep going. We keep going. And they each exhibit different levels of consciousness, raising your consciousness. In Christianity, it's believing in God and helping those that are less fortunate than you. In Zoroastrianism, it's good works, good deeds, basically good life. So it's doing these things. And then in Islam, it's basically the same premise, just doing good and thanking God. And that raises your consciousness, that raises your frequency, so to speak. And so you have to wonder, was religion created? And this isn't me, this is me, all of a sudden I'm an atheist. No, this is just me just posing a point. Are we all of a sudden rising up higher in regards to the human conscious because of religion? Or did religion raise our consciousness?
It's another good question, because if you listen to somebody who's a pure, real militant atheist, they'll say that religion stunts your consciousness. Whereas on the other hand, even if I was purely an atheistic person, I would see it more on the opposite, because I would say it takes an awful lot of imagination to come up with all that stuff without a base for it. So if it was all completely made up, somebody had to be pretty darn conscious to come up with all of that. Even if it's a con, act, you have to that's a lot to come up with for a person, right? So on the other hand of the spectrum, I think a lot of the religions, they go too far in the fact that this is the only way to free your mind. You have to do this, you have to do this, to do this. But everybody has different ideas, and they can't all be right, or maybe they can. Maybe spirituality really is such a far-reaching thing, And you can do so many different things to expand your consciousness if you're willing to do it, as long as you don't cut yourself off from everyone else.
Right.
And that's the other thing. Like, a lot of them turn into elitism and they believe that this is the only way to do it. And so you're kind of hurting yourself. You're kind of cutting yourself off from a lot of other viable sources
Right.
of expansion, of ways of thinking. And I mean, some of them are dangerous. There are some dangerous spiritualities out there. There's a lot of, like, well, I've talked about doing left-hand path stuff on the show before. There are a lot of kind of dangerous stuff on that side because people don't understand it, or they think like, oh, it's cool, we're gonna get into the devil and stuff. And it's like, if you're serious about that, you're gonna cause yourself some problems. Like,
get into the devil.
if you're just playing around, you might still cause some problems, but it won't be as bad. If you're serious and you seriously think you're doing this, you're probably gonna warp your brain a little bit. And you're going to mess yourself up. But people on the other side can do the same thing. People in fundamentalist groups, like, constantly, you're like, and it's funny because it reminds me of me today. I didn't do this because I was trying to connect with anything, but a lot of people do the dance with the snakes and they get bit. I wasn't dancing with a snake today, but I did get bit by a snake. That's true.
He did straight up get bit by a snake.
It was a garter snake, so I'm okay. Obviously, I'm not envenomed. But
of course, of all people, right?
But it's just funny that ties into the discussion today. But the people who believe, like, I can do this, whereas there is, that's a weird follow through. Right, there are actual societies, like Native American groups and things, who did, dance with snakes.
Yes.
And were fine because they were also respectful to the animal. They were, whereas these people are just like, I can do it because my faith protects me. Oh, I'm dead. So,
but there's been some instances of people getting bit by those snakes and still living.
And that's true. And is that a case of their actual, is that a case of their consciousness having expanded to be able to overcome that? Or is that just pure luck?
Well, I mean, and the thing about it is this too, is like, we don't, like, especially in snake biting, we don't take into account people's physiology. Like, is there something in their DNA that keeps, like, was their daddy a snake handler before, and he got bit so many times that when they had this child, it built up some form of immunity? We're no medical experts, but that's something you have to wonder too. Like, did that, in a way, influence the DNA of that child, so now they can take the random, whatever snakes they hold? I think I don't know if they're water moccasins or like coral snakes. This is real big in the Appalachian areas. Because I've read about snake handlers and all that. And a lot of it is basically an Appalachian thing of like, hey, our faith is so good that even if we get bit, we're going to live. And there have been instances of people living after getting bit by the snake. I'm not saying we should go do this, by the way. Like, we will never. I would go to one of those services. Sure, I would go see it, go see what it's about, because the energy sits different in those kind of places. Supposedly, the Kaaba has crazy energy because there's nothing but pilgrims that come in and worship it, bow before it, and it sits in Mecca. It's in the heart of Mecca, and the pilgrims and every Muslim is essentially supposed to make a pilgrimage to it once in their lifetime. And it's supposedly a meteorite of some form, or some unknown substance. So once again, why did that come into being? Why did it come about that, okay, this is this thing and we got to make it here? What is so special? What about our consciousness has that been pulled from? It also, the consciousness idea also reminds me of our fear of the dark, our primal fear of the dark. And I'm not saying that afraid of, like, oh my God, I don't want to go out at it, but your senses are heightened. Your senses are 100% heightened when you go out in the dark, as opposed to when you go out in the daytime. Daytime, you're like, oh, safe, I'm good. Night, though, it's a little bit different. Where, and I feel like that's something that's been ingrained in us for so long, because a lot of our ancestors had to be out at night when things happened, and like the Native Americans and things like that. And you read about all these strange things happening at night. And then we read about accounts of things happening at night, whether it be wild animals, crazy people, the unknown. And we're like, no, I'm not going to this place at night. It's dark. There's no way. I can't see my hand in front of my face. It terrifies me. Now, is that our consciousness from something that happened before? Or is it just this fear that we have because there's no light? Like we're so used to light. I read a book years ago called Nightfall by Isaac Asimov and Robert Silverberg, and it was about people that had never seen darkness ever. They had 6 sons, so they never saw darkness, and they had a cave, and it was like a ride. It was like a attraction, and they went into this cave, and they saw darkness. They experienced darkness, and after that point, they always hid in their homes or in their apartments with the curtain shut. They didn't want to see light. And there was a solar eclipse coming, and they were digging, and they kept finding spaces and rubble and disaster. And come to find out, the solar eclipse caused people to go mad because they had never seen darkness. And these people that were going to this cave in this attraction went mad because they had seen darkness, but now it was on a grand scale. So I wonder if something like that happened to us at some point to make us afraid of the dark. Or is it just something that because there's no light, right? That it's just,
It's another good point. It reminds me of the discussion we had a while back about the Uncanny Valley. How we'll see things that are unnatural, and a lot of times you'll see something that's unnatural. Like, let's say you'll see darkness, and you're like, all right, it's dark. I'm getting tingly, but everything's fine. But there's a fear there that you might see something in the dark,
yes,
or that something might encounter you in the dark. And that begs the question, is that something that's hardwired into us from encounters that our ancestors actually had
yes,
over a certain number of time? Just like how in the Uncanny Valley, does that fight or flight mechanism exist because we encountered something that looked like us but wasn't, but was so close that we couldn't tell the difference until we interacted with it, and then because it looked so close, it freaked us out. So that it's like pod people, how you look at your neighbor and anybody could be a creature in disguise. Yes. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's built into our consciousness. We have a lot of phobias. We have a lot of people who are afraid of spiders. And it's not that they've been bitten by a poisonous spider, or that they've seen or heard or even know that spiders are poisonous. Sometimes they just know, oh, it's a spider. It's creepy. I hate spiders. Or again, with snakes, like some people, like, I'm afraid of snakes. I'm afraid of reptiles, even though they've never seen a movie with a poisonous snake. They've never seen Anaconda. Right. They've never seen, but they have this ingrown fear of that kind of thing. And so where does that come from? Is that part of who we are? Has it been developed a certain way? Has it been given to us a certain way? Were we programmed to react that way? Another good point of our consciousness that we don't yet understand. Phobias are a really big area that psychology has yet to unravel.
And phobias range from things such as agoraphobia, which, I have a little bit of. I don't like being in crowds. I'm not a fan of being in crowds. It's just too many people together at one time and not being able to escape if something goes awry. That's why I'm not a fan of it. To, things of like being afraid of the toaster, being afraid of electronics, being afraid of going outside, but where do we get now? A lot of those I think are so much subconscious as they are event-based. Something happened to you in your childhood, or you went through a trauma and now you're afraid of that certain thing. And that turns into a phobia. The the interesting part about all this human consciousness, and this is something that fascinates me, is the ideology of I think, therefore I am. So because I have rational thought in my head, I'm a human being. Because I can decide if I want to do something, as opposed to, say, like an ant who doesn't have a large brain. So all of the power that it has goes into its strength. It goes into its movement, things like that. Bees, it goes into their ability to do this, do that. So, you have to think, is your consciousness really slowing us down? Is our consciousness slowing us down because we have to make these rational decisions? Can't just say, okay, I'm going to pick up all my stuff and move. You just pick it up and go. You're out, right? We have to rationalize it. I'm not saying people don't do that. But what I'm saying is they have the initial thought of doing it, right? It's not just something that they just do robotically. They don't just pick things up and move. They, at least for a split second, if they're going to do it, split second rationalization. I should just pack my stuff and move to California. So they pack all their stuff and they move to California. They still give it some thought as to where insects, animals, things like that don't do that. So they just kind of do it. And our consciousness kind of enables us to rationalize the things that we do. Oh, I moved out to California because I wanted to get a better job. Or, I went to the beach because I wanted a good vacation, things like that. And we don't take into account those small things when it comes to consciousness. We think that, people say human consciousness, they automatically think, oh, it's, you're raising your vibration or you're doing this and that. But really, it's just waking up in the morning, right? Because you're unconscious when you sleep. You're in a different state of mind when you sleep. So the minute you wake up, you are conscious again. So your consciousness is back in play. It's realizing you're awake. It's thinking. It's getting up in the morning and rationalizing your thought processes for the day and thinking to yourself, what kind of day do I want to have? Conscientiously, you're like, I want to have a good day. Well, what's going to happen? And you break down these things and you're like, well, I got to go to work and then I got to pay bills and then I got to do this and I got to do that. As for animals, don't have that. They don't go to work. Mm-hmm. They don't pay bills. They don't worry about anything. They're not warriors. The anxiety isn't rampant, in the animal kingdom, but it is in our neck of the woods. In humanity, people are always anxious. There's always anxiety flying all over the place. Is that a direct cause of consciousness? Like, because we're conscious of these things, right? We have the anxiety. Or does the anxiety cause our consciousness? Meaning that, okay, this is going to happen today. I got to change my mind frame to be able to handle it.
I kind of think that the whole anxiety thing is more a side effect of being so conscious. Because for me personally, I've done a lot lately within the last several weeks, months to just kind of simplify my life from things I got to think about. Like, I don't see myself as a real stressed out person. But I am a person who gets I get stuck on stuff and then I get grouchy about it. And then that grouchiness just bothers me for day after day after day. Like, I'm just constantly, this thing just bothers me. So I cut things out. Like, I don't spend as much time on social media. I've cut back that by a ton because it was causing me issues. I wasn't going nuts with it. I wasn't crazy, but it was definitely a problem with my mental health. And so I've cut that out. I've cut other things out. I've tried to simplify a lot more things in my life. And that's part of the problem is we have so many choices. And it's good to have choices. Like being able to wake up and say, oh, do I want coffee or tea? I'm going to have some coffee. Do I want toast or eggs or bacon? Right. All of them, clearly. But sometimes there's just too many choices. There's too much entertainment. There's too much to watch on TV. There's too many games to play. There's too many restaurants to try. There's just too much. Right. And so I think that causes, even on some low level, might not even really think about it. You might not see all these choices and be like, oh, well, what if I wanted to watch channel 475? Or what if I wanted to watch all these different streaming things about how to make a kite? Like, sure, but having to decide between all that stuff is causing tiny little things in your brain to be going like, which one do I pick? Do I pick this? If it's just like two choices, okay, there you go. But even that is getting hard these days. It's getting difficult just to pick between one or the other because there's just so much out there anymore. And so I think because we have the ability to choose so many things and make so many decisions for ourselves, I think that causes us the anxiety. But is that a product of our consciousness already or just a product of the modern world? Because I think our consciousness hasn't expanded too much from when we used to be, maybe even the Middle Ages, technically. We had fewer choices, but I think we were still just as conscious as we are now. Even back building the pyramids and all those other kind of things. I think we have been a very intelligent species for a very long time. And I just think that the number of choices have just added on to that and just compounded that. But I think we've always been a little bit like conscious enough to deal with everything. It's just we've lost that simplicity. And so it's led to higher levels of anxiety.
I think too, and you bring up social media as a very good point, because social media is, it's basically a place for people to go, um, to be something and to snoop on other people's lives. That's basically what it's for. It's to see what other people are doing.
Voyeurism.
Yes, so they have high levels of anxiety because they're not living up to other people. They see other people on social media and they're like, I want to live like they live, or I want to put myself out on social media because I want people to recognize me because nobody else will recognize me. So I want people to recognize me. So I put myself out there for people
and then
to
you have to
recognize
maintain that image, or else.
Yes.
So you have that constant, like, I have to be good enough. I keep trying to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Or I got to post this many times a day because if I don't, people won't care.
Yep.
Or I got to put this picture up of me because I want people to think I'm attractive, or I want people to think I look good. So I'm gonna, take the best possible picture. You might take 60 pictures just to put one picture on social media, just for people to like, to react. And it's that feeling of acceptance, I think, that we all crave. Every one of us wants to be accepted. Even the person that's like, I don't want to be accepted, I'm going to be left alone. Okay, but in some small way, if somebody was like you and had similar thoughts, you would want them to accept you. And like, okay, talk on the internet, talk on message boards. And to me, you see that. You see people, and with different trends that they have on social media, people will do these trends so they can pick up traction, so they can be popular or be accepted. And the first thing you have to do is accept yourself. You don't accept yourself, nobody else is going to accept you. Now, am I saying that social media is the worst thing ever? Yes. And it's because we have become so nosy about other people's lives. We're always worried about somebody else and not worried about ourselves enough. And like I said, I don't think that it's 100% horrible. I don't think that I think there's good points and I think there's bad points.
I mean,
And
we're using it right now, clearly.
Yes. And we're posting it on social media. We're posting it on things to get people's attention. So sure, I want people to come in to here and have conversations and we go back and forth. Yes, of course I want that. But that's the positive aspect. If you're using social media to kind of give yourself self-esteem based off of strangers, right? That's the negative aspect. You don't have a good enough circle around you, so you're trying to fix that by putting yourself out there and getting acceptance from strangers. But I think that's a weird high to chase, because on one hand it creates a version of yourself that is fake. It's not, I'm like I said, this isn't everybody. This is not everybody. I'm not talking to everybody on social media. There's a lot of amazing people. Sherry Brake is one of those people that is on social media. That's a very awesome person. I wouldn't know her if it wasn't from social media. It wasn't, meeting other people and doing that. But I'm talking about people that have to put on airs to impress other people. Me and Spider, we don't impress other people on social media. That's something we do. We're not like that. We're not here to do that. And that's a lot of people. That's most of the people I know. Pretty much all the people I know that they're on social media. That's, they're just using it for fun. They're not using it to show off their latest dinnerware or their latest acquisitions. Look, I got a new car. Look, I got 4 new cars. And it just it's a more of a materialistic aspect. And I think that as a whole messes up your consciousness, because you want what other people have, so you will go to the ends of the earth to get it. And it's a weird, healthy obsession, I think, when it comes to that.
Once you get to that point where you have to put out that image and you're a successful person, quote unquote,
Yes,
you have to maintain that. And that's a problem.
yes.
And I point to certain people in the music world. Like I'll point to, and I don't want to get people all riled up about it because of the latest, whatever stuff happened over the past year. But Marilyn Manson, for one, is somebody who that's his image.
Yes.
That's not his real name. Obviously, his name is Brian. But he's had this image of this shocking person for so long that he's become that. It's consumed him. It's taken him over. And maybe he always had those dark tendencies inside, and that's why he made this image of himself to act that out and be like, oh, it's just, for fun. But regardless, that's become who he is. He can't be anybody else. He can't go out and pretend to just be some dude on the street. Maybe he can try, but it won't work. He's always going to be this image of this shocking person. If you talk to him, he's going to talk like that because now he has a new audience. He has a person to impress. And too many people out in the world are like that, especially celebrities nowadays. There's a lot of celebrities, and with TikTok and even with stuff like YouTube, even though we're using it now, even with stuff like Twitch, which we both use, even all that stuff, that's just added to people putting out these images of themselves that now they have to keep up that image. And if they keep it up far enough, they become that. And they lose track of who they might have been before. And so people see you out in public, even when you're out with your family. Now, suddenly you're this other person. You're a performer. You got to perform for them. Even if you don't want to or you consciously don't think about it, you do it because that's what you've become. And that's the problem. We've put these people on pedestals rather than just being like, oh, I like this channel. I like what this person has to say. Instead, it's, oh, this person is the best. They're so great. They're right about everything. Hey, dude, you're perfect about everything. Keep doing what you're doing. I love this episode because of this. And people hear so much of that they have to maintain that. And that's who they become.
Yes.
And it changes their consciousness. They don't think about, even if they think about just doing normal stuff, they can't really do that. They are now the person they've created in their head.
We have Andrew Tate. I don't know if you know who this person is. I know who he is. I've seen some of his videos, watched some of his stuff. It's very, they call it red pill, I guess. I don't really get into the terminology.
It's the conspiracy stuff. Yeah.
No, it's not the conspiracy stuff.
Well, the red pill is part of the whole conspiracy language.
But basically, he's like, how do I put this? Fornicate with females and acquire currency is that, like, without swearing, is his mentality. And he's like, just do it. You know, like, I do this, and if they don't like it, that's too bad. A very selfish mentality. Well, he was getting young boys, like, I want to say like 14, 15. You know, when you're impressionable as a teenager, you're going to latch on to something. And if you don't have a positive role model in your life, you're going to latch on to a negative one, usually, because you're going to be like, oh, well, they give me acceptance. They give me the things I don't have at home that I never got at home. So now I'm going to act like they act, or I'm going to listen to what they listen to. And he got deplatformed on a couple places, but it was just like, when you listen to him talk, you're like, wow, the consciousness that you are perceiving is going to get people hurt because you're living a different life than them and you're telling them they can live that life. And it's very manipulative of a consciousness, because having conscious thoughts, beliefs, ideologies, all that jazz is good until you use it to hurt other people. We talked about religious fundamentalism and how they'll bleed people dry, you know, and this isn't me knocking religion. Many of you know that, you know, I have religious beliefs and all that, but I will never understand the mega churches. And it's a lot of just trapping a person's consciousness. And
Ainsley and Pat Robertson.
Yeah, all of that. Benny Hinn, all that. Yeah. Yeah, like all of those televangelists, they're real big into doing that, into the whole concept of, you know what, I'm going to promote fear. I'm going to push fear so that you don't have a choice. You have to listen to me, because if you don't, bad things are going to happen to you. And then what happens is that puts the thought in your head that when you leave and bad things do happen, you're like, oh man, he said that was going to happen. I got to turn and go back. And then you come right
self-fulfilling
back.
prophecy.
It's a very, very horrible thing. And as a person who went to the Ernest Angley Church, I saw it firsthand. I saw the consciousness there. Just, it was a basic hive-minded idea. It was you know, a puppeteer controlling the strings, and you saw it. You saw the people giving 3 times the service, and then you would feel bad if you didn't. Like, people would feel genuinely bad if they couldn't afford it, and they're passing the plate. And there's $100 bills in this thing, and there's this, that, and the third, and he's up there saying this and saying that, and one of the things that I really am not a big fan of, when it comes to, you know, religion, especially Christianity. I can't speak for other religions, but when people say, yes, my pastor or my, you know, whatever tells me to read it for yourself. Okay. By you saying that, mind you, your pastor's already put it in your head, how he is teaching. So when you read, you're not going to separate the two. You're going to say, okay, this is what he said. Oh, look, it says it here. But he's twisted it just slightly so that it takes on a negative component. And I think when it comes to religious texts, it's something you have to study on your own. And then, whatever religion you're going into, pray about it. Pray to the God of whatever you're believing in to give you wisdom and insight, because man's going to botch it, especially you're at church. I mean, it's a business. A church is a business. They got to keep the lights on somehow, right? And it's not cheap. And I'm not saying don't go to church, right? I'm not saying that. If that's what helps you to live, to be a better person, so be it. That's on you. That's not on me. I can't judge you for going to church. I used to go to church, so I can't, but I think that, there's some churches that, like Joel Osteen's church, it's a gigantic church. It's like $1 billion church. And he didn't let anybody in when those floods were happening. I think it was Texas. If I'm not
until the news got on him about it. And it was like, oh, well, we just had the carpets cleaned and whatever. And they came up with some really, really silly excuse. And they let people in, but it was kind of like, okay.
Yeah, after
only because people yelled at you about it.
And the funny thing about it is, if Christ, there's an old saying that if Christ came back, most churches wouldn't know it was Christ coming back. They would remove him from the church. And that just made me think of old Joel Osteen. And it's like, you wonder how people get ensnared in these people's deceit, much like cult leaders. We have cult leaders like Applewhite, and you have Shoko Asahara. And you're like, how do people get snared into that? Your consciousness should tell you this isn't a good thing. This is a negative thing. I watched the cult members of the Heaven's Gate, because they gave, I wouldn't say last will and testimonies, but it was basically them saying, we're happy. We love it here. We're reborn people. We're going to go on to the Haley's, that was Hale Bob, I think, and they were going to take it to wherever. And I remember a dude, he was 19. And I just thought to myself, man, you
missing out on a lot of things in life.
But once again, that was their decision, and the thing is, their consciousness was altered to a state that, while it might have been a higher consciousness in terms of being able to think in a different plane, it was a negative one. It was one of I don't know. These people didn't feel accepted. And that's what happens with a lot of cult members. They don't feel accepted. Jim Jones brought in a bunch of people. Every Sunday, church was packed in San Francisco. One day, went to Ghana and Jonestown massacre. Shot him, made him drink Kool-Aid. And it's just the consciousness there, and it's hard for me to sit and say, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because we've all struggled with our identities, who we are as people, right? We've all been like, man, I don't feel accepted. I don't feel like I belong to anything. I feel like this is all an S show, if you will, for lack of better phrasing. And we've all sat and thought, man, and we've been at our lowest of lows. And who knows, maybe somebody came along, poured some honey in our ear, and we would be in a cult. I'm not saying I would, but I'm saying it's easy to see when you're lowest of lows, and here comes somebody with a helping hand that understands what you've been through and knows what it's like. And you're like, you gravitate to that person, you gravitate to that ideology, because your consciousness has been kind of warped. You've been kicked around and treated like trash. Your consciousness can't evolve from that because you don't have time for it to evolve, because maybe you're dealing with personal issues. And so your consciousness, if it doesn't have an ability to raise, it'll stay or lower. And the more you don't eat, the more you don't sleep, the more you don't take care of yourself, it lowers, because now your body's going into defense mode. It's trying to survive. So now you think, nobody cares. And then here comes somebody with a helping hand, and boom, now all of a sudden you're in a cult. And it is really just that easy for that to happen.
Yeah. And with that, I think we're at the last couple minutes of the show. So probably start to wrap up here a little bit. what do we got going on? We got more episodes of this.
We got lots more. I'll be getting back to my cutting video for YouTube clips, because those are getting pretty good traction. So I'm gonna start doing that again. Took a little bit of time off from that. Our documentaries are still coming up. Do not fret. We're still getting those in. I will be speaking on the 8th in Morgantown, and I'll be speaking on the 15th in Fayette County, Pennsylvania. One for our good buddy Les Odell's big extravaganza, WV case, big old expo. Looking forward to doing that. And then on this 15th, I think it's 15th, 16th, in Fayette County for a UFO event, which I'm very excited for. I'm very excited for both, actually. So yeah, I will be. Feel free to come out, say hey, say what's up, say I've seen your show, love your show. Where is your co-host? I don't love him so much. He's always mad about everything. He's always grumpy.
Yeah, I'll warn everybody ahead of time. Like until the end of probably October, I'm going to be booked up pretty tight, because October is my kid's birthday.
Yes.
And so we spend September leading up to October spending money on birthday gifts and birthday stuff and all that other kind of thing. And I have a big dinosaur extravaganza that's coming through on Sunday to Talmadge, Ohio. Yes. I don't know if anybody's local, but that's kind of expensive. So
he'll be out there. Go meet him.
But yeah, I'll be out there, looking at dinosaurs. But there will be eventually new episodes of the Spirits Club, because funds have been low. I don't have much to really present, so I'm kind of like,
no, that makes sense.
I don't want to go on and just be like, hey, guess what? I'm drinking water today. Let's talk about water.
Let's talk about water. Let's talk about beverages. Let's talk about water. Dasani.
This is a cup of coffee I made 12 hours ago, and I forgot about it. It's cold.
It's a little
now.
cold.
Let's see how it tastes.
It's not that great.
But there will be new episodes of that coming up, so don't worry about that. So that's the Uncanny Spirits Club. You are still doing this Uncanny Gaming.
We're doing some of that. We're doing some of that. We're also I got ideas too. So I got some other things in the works. As soon as I get to another person about it, there's something I've been working on, some other things with. I'll be getting to that. So, but yeah, that's it. I want to thank everybody for coming out. You guys are freaking awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry Break, for the comments. You are awesome. Go check out Sherry Break. Anyways, we'll see you next week for episode 206. And as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week.